Mr. Chemical.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Could I get a small chocolate cone sauce?
Soft serve?
Yeah.
Do you want anything on that?
Nope, that'd be fine.
Just chocolate? Yeah. Is that all? It's gonna be $4.48.
Just me. What, you're giving me a wooden nickel?
There you go.
Thank you.
Small chocolate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
up the homeless path and hide out beside the fence of last year. I think I have pictures of it last year. I have to remember to bring my grabber. Oh, my dear. Oh, my dear. It's so quiet here. It's a major highway just behind me, 3 blocks away. And I can hear the sound over on Germantown, Howe's Neck. Better than I can hear the traffic behind me. I have Route 3A, which is a major such an old park. It's a river park, tidal river park. It's got a swamp. As you go up the river, it's called Broad Meadows, which is a junior high school that they built in the swamp. They built 2, at least, in a swamp up in North Quincy. Atlantic Junior High School was built on a swamp. They actually had to restructure their gymnasium because it fell off into the swamp. Had a fellow by the name of Mr. Lewis. I don't know what his first name was. It wasn't Bob. Who was one of Jack Kennedy's followers. He was the football coach. He got busted for some form of pedophilia on a camping trip. Sad end to a great story. Not a very good football coach. I was new in the school. I came into the school. We had just before we came from Pennsylvania, we had gone to the whatever discount store was around, and they had bright red pants. I mean bright red. I loved them. And I wore them to school with a shocking pink, you know, not a soft pink, but a shocking pink shirt, short sleeve, and I wore that to school. And suddenly, and I carried a boombox around, and I played it. And I played it everywhere. And one day, a few fellow thugs who didn't like me much, I wore red pants and pink shirts, knocked the boombox out of my hand as I was walking down the hall. And of course I was a feisty little thing because I wore red pants and pink shirts. And so the scrum ensued. I do not remember hitting or being hit. I do remember scrumming around in the hall. And then this fellow Michael Fallon, who later changed his name to Michael Hart, which is the name of his father, and he lived with his mother and father something or other. Well, anyway, it was not a happy household, and at some point his mother had plunged his feet into a piping hot bath and burned the hell out of his feet. I mean, serious, burned the hell out of his feet. Lived in a place on Elm Street called Fort Apache, one of the first 10-foot wooden stockade fences in the neighborhood. Everybody else had those roses and little white fences, you know. Wollaston was a fairly upper middle class, educated society. Eastern Nazarene College was there. And, well, anyway, he joined in the fray on my behalf and knocked several of the fellows for a loop. The largest of them, I forget what his name was. I could just call him Red. He had red hair. But they all played on the football team, and then I ended up going out for the football team, so of course I had many great excursions on the football plane with my teammates who hated my guts, and of course I had just moved into the country, so I was rather shaggy-headed anyway. So I fit right in with the hip crowd. They loved me. I carried a boombox. Met a young lady named Peg Kelly then. Through Michael, maybe, but I don't think so. Peg Kelly went to the same school. She lived around the street. She ended up for the next 4 years of high school walking me to school every day so that I didn't get killed. We had several adventures, Peg Kelly and I, being chased by crews from Dorchester. They would come down and carloads of Dorchester boys getting out of Dorchester because they were too hot for the cops. And they stumbled upon me one time when I was walking down the street with Peg, and I ended up, she said, what are we going to do? And they're getting out of their cars coming after us, screaming about my hair, which was almost shoulder length. Certainly not as long as Peg's, but I said, you run for that porch with a light on it. I'll take care of them. Because, I was young and brash. I can do many things. So I did. And then, so she did, and of course, I remembered several things from somewhere. Might have been Doctor Who. Said, whenever you are greeted by a group, run into them, grab somebody, pull them to the ground, put them on top of you, and let them take the beat. Well, that's what I did. Except for that guy was a little bit bigger than me and just kind of rolled off. Of course, when he rolled off, that gave me the impetus to get up. So I got up and ran again. They, of course, gave suit, and I did the same thing again, by which time she had raised people out from the porch who came storming down the street, protecting that hippie boy that they really hated, but there was a young lady with him, and he was getting beat by Dorchester boys. So all of a sudden I had 6 other teenagers, 19, 18, 19, who had been in the house, come running out and protecting us, and we just lived. I lived 2 blocks away on one side, and she lived 2 blocks away on the other, and Peg just happened to be, people knew her family. She had a big family of Kellys, and I knew her for many years, and then we lost contact. She was down the Cape with somebody, and then there was a notorious affair with a lady in green where she ended up calling me all kinds of names, and because of course I answered the telephone in her house. She told me to. She said, I'm going to call you in an hour. And a little bit less than an hour, the phone rang. I thought, well, that's an hour. And so then I saw her a couple of times after that. Suddenly I showed up one time and she started accusing me of stealing shit. And I smiled and I said, hey, listen, I hope your boyfriend's not too mad, but don't be, and she called the cops on me and had them come down and talk to me, and, she told them this story, and I told them my story, and they couldn't do anything about it because there were no rings. I didn't have them. They got a search warrant, they went through my house, I didn't have them. I had very... And so that was a snafu, and then everybody kind of, and Michael and I went into business for a while. Michael Fallon, a place called Torpie, and he ran all over the place trying to get stuff for it. And so he found people that would put stuff in for nothing. We weren't gonna. And so it was like $1.50 a month for the store. And we stocked it fairly well, had it, up to snuff, looked good. And then he took off for 6 weeks, just disappeared. And when he came back, I had this young lady that wanted to go to California, she had a car, but she couldn't drive it herself. And I said, well, I've done it a couple of times. I can drive you to California and then take a bus back, or something else would happen. I'd figure out how to get back. She didn't have to worry about it. I would drop her and her car off, and we would go on our ways. She had a boyfriend waiting for her, so it was like probably the cleanest ride I ever took. I did take another one many years later, much the same way. It was people that, well, we want to go, but we don't want to drive it all. We need some help driving. If you'd like to drive with us, we'll take you out. And by then my brother Scott was living in Oakland, so I went there. But so with this place called Torpy, Michael took off and just disappeared. I'm going out and finding stuff, and he went out and he found stuff, and not what we were looking for, but and then he said, well, I'm tired and I'm not going to do anything anymore for a while, sell stuff. And so this lady came along and said, and he'd just taken basically a vacation. He went camping with his friends and went to flea markets, and stuff on the weekends, but the rest of the time he was just flopping around in Vermont and New Hampshire. And I had a lot of artist stuff in my store, and this lady says, well, let's go, and I says, okay. And so I figured, well, I got a 3-4 day drive out there. She said, we'll take a week. I said, oh, we'll see what happens. Because when I drive long distance, I just get in and go, and I can drive for hours. I can drive for hours. I can drive all night long, So we made good time. It was kind of springtime, before summer came up. And so I drove her out there. We had a good time. Her car almost didn't make it up the mountains in the west, coming out of Nevada. But we finally made it. It was good time. Made it to San Francisco. I think I stayed at my brother John's at that time. Up in Richmond. Wonderful times they were. And then it just fell apart. And I came back, of course, and they're telling him that I was taking this 2-week trip to California, and it turned out to be 2 weeks. I flew back. No, I didn't. I took a bus. That's right, I took a bus that time. I like buses. And that one went through Salt Lake instead of going up the Northway. And we, before I left, he gave me some guff about it, and I said, Michael, all you have to do is walk in here, straighten up the store, and talk to customers. That's what we do. We open up our doors. That's what I'd been doing. And we'd been, fairly unsuccessful. I mean, I'm a young hippie boy and I play guitar, and I had a couple of young people come in and buy things. There's a whole bunch of kids on this beach. I didn't know this beach had kids, but I'm in the middle of a neighborhood, so here we are in Quincy Point, almost at the point. The soap factory takes up the point, so. And here I've got a bunch of screaming kids down the beach. I'm gonna stop this. We've talked about Michael Hart. Oh, anyway, the end of that story, because as I was getting ready to leave, and he came and he said, "No, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to close this store, and we'll see what happens." Well, this was because he said, "No, you can't go. You know, you have to stay and do this." And I said, "But I got 2 weeks. I'll be back. I've stoned you this far, don't worry about it." And he said, and I, boom, whapped him right in the side of the head. I think I fractured his cheekbone. He swung back, I ducked, and then I left. That's always been my history. I'm a one. I'll hit you once. If you piss me off enough, I'll hit you once. I don't get pissed off easily enough to do it very often, but when I got back, he was still angry, and and the store closed almost immediately because he refused to tell me who was supposed to get the money for the stuff. Just wouldn't do it, wouldn't give me the information. I started getting phone calls from people. I said, "Okay, I'm sorry, my partner has who came out and talked to you, has refused to tell me who to pay for what we get sold." And they said, "Well, this is what we put in." And I said, "Well, do you have a receipt for this? I can tell you right now that I have sold 3 pieces for money, and your money is here." Well, they hadn't planned on coming in to collect their money. You know, that was another cost that they hadn't thought of. But Michael wouldn't do anything. Michael wouldn't take them their money. I did send some money by wire. I said, do you get, Western Union at the time? And he said, "We have a Western Union right up at the hardware store." I says, "Okay, well, if you have their number, I can wire you, or their address. I can wire you the money. And receipt is through Western Union, and this is what I'm sending you. You wrote a check to Western Union, and they sent the money, put the money into Western Union, and they sent it. Very efficient. The police departments use it. You often have to find a Western Union now, but because that's a wire service that poor people use. So there aren't a lot of them, and they overcharge, and but I sent some money back that way, and then some people didn't have anything. He took this stuff and he said yada yada, and I said, "Well, yada yada yada, I can't just send you money because you said this, and my records of what I've sold are not these things that you're saying you gave him." And so eventually that became too much for me. I couldn't handle the business end of it myself, so I didn't. But anyway, Torpai closed. I took all the stock home with me. I continued, I had the same phone number. I continued to get phone calls on it. And sure enough, there's a whole world out there. 27 minutes, 30 minutes, 28 minutes. Well, so that was that one. That was a trip to California with, I forget her name. I want to say Carol. I don't know why I want to say that name. I really don't think that was her name. But she got where she was going and I got where I was going, and her car was still running when it got there. Not as well as it was when we left, but it was still running. And we closed up Torpai, and Michael has talked to me several times since then, but got very distant and then disappeared. And then I moved out. We were living together at some point in Cambridge. I think before that. Yes, that was before. No, had to be after that. I ended up living in 1983, 84. I ended up living beside the high school. This lovely bird just flew up and I missed it. Oh, maybe I didn't miss it. I can see it now. So that was all Margaret Kelly from North Quincy, right through high school. We graduated in 1968. She went on to go to college. I think she went to Eagle School, Boston College or something. And what happened then? And I went and stayed with her and her boyfriend Carl down at and it was while after I was living with that whole group, Carl and Michael and a whole bunch of people from the South Shore. Carl ended up running a leather store over on Western Avenue. I moved over to Green Street after that. I was working for the Title X program with the MBT, with the people that ran the islands at the time. Yeah, MTA. No, it wasn't the MTA. It wasn't the trolley company. It was the I can't remember. Anyway, we worked out of Nantasket, rode one of them LST landing crafts out to the islands and did all the work. It was fun, there was a bunch of crazy people. We were all unemployable, really. We got a connection that told us about this job, basically goofing off in the middle of Boston Harbor. Come on. And it was fun. I hurt my neck, and bad workers. Bad on my part too. I did the wrong thing. and the person behind me compounded it by doing the wrong thing. And so there we were doing the wrong thing, and the board fell on my neck, and that hampered me forever after, and they got rid of me as quickly as possible. I was one of the first to let go in the fall, and I was happy about that at the time because it got cold right away. And I pitied those people riding that boat out to those islands on any given day that it was 20 degrees. And they did. They worked right up until the 1st of December. And it was cold that fall. And so I got done. But that house fell apart. Everybody else moved out, and I couldn't handle the rent, so because I'd just been let go. So I moved back down to the South Shore for a week or so. And then these people I was driving a band around said, "Oh, we got an apartment over here that nobody's living in. Rent controlled. We know the landlord." Hey, so they got me a job. They got me a housing for $120 a month, 2 bedrooms and another room, and a storage room right on Green Street at the corner of Hampshire and Green Street. It was beautiful. And the musicians lived upstairs. I was working with a band, hauling them around in my truck. Had a driveway to park in. Generally didn't use it, but a grand use of life. Lived there for several years. Oh my God. Lots of stories with that band, the same old thing. They were all people that I had met through Carl, through working this job. One of them